Welcome to another installment of Defend Nonprofits, Defend Democracy, the ongoing series here on your Fund the People podcast, the show that equips you to invest in the nonprofit workforce. I'm your host, Rusty Stahl, President and CEO of Fund the People. Today, you'll get a terrific primer on nonprofit narrative resilience in the age of the Trump administration's war on charity. Our guest is Vanessa Wakeman, founder and CEO of the Wakeman Agency, an accomplished leader with deep knowledge about the politics of social change and mastery at advancing the efforts of values-driven organizations. Vanessa is a trusted advisor to organizations around the globe. She has been successfully leading initiatives to support communications for nonprofits, socially responsible businesses, and other stakeholders since she founded the Wakeman Agency in 2003. Vanessa helps clients to build and restore trust with internal and external audiences, to develop ongoing communications that strengthen organizational positioning among key audiences. Vanessa has increasingly been called upon by a host of organizations to help them reimagine their values, culture, and operations through the lens of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Her approach to communications uses behavioral science practices to shift perceptions and behaviors. Vanessa Wakeman, you were one of the first people to introduce me to being on podcasts by inviting me to be a guest, so I really appreciate that. Yes. And when we started talking about you coming on, I was like, absolutely, because you introduced me to this medium in a lot of ways. So thank you for being here today on the Fund the People podcast. It
is my absolute pleasure. And I still remember our conversation on my podcast. I think that was back in 2017, 2018. Yikes.
Wow. Yeah.
So yes. We've come a long way, baby.
You've been doing this a while, and your show is still going, correct?
My show. So we took a hiatus after COVID. Like, things were insane with Wakeman and just so busy. Didn't have the capacity to do it properly. And so we took a hiatus, and we just returned actually last year. I had a great season talking about communications, and we are now recording for our next season with foundation CEOs. So really excited about that one.
Nice. Okay. Well, tell us about the Wakeman Agency.
Sure. So Wakeman is a strategic communications agency focused on the nonprofit sector. So we work with nonprofits, foundations, and socially responsible companies. And really, our thinking is that communications is the foundation of everything that an organization needs to sort of communicate or sort of engage with its audiences. And so wanting to make sure that communications is woven into every aspect of the work. So whether that's programs, you need to communicate sort of effectively what is the program, fundraising, audience awareness, amplification. So communications to us is the bedrock of everything an organization needs to do to be successful.
Awesome. I'm really excited to be back in touch with you and to learn from you. I got a lot out of the prep call we had for this conversation. So I'm really excited to hear that your show is back and that you're still kicking.
Yes. July is our 23rd birthday. So we're still alive and kicking. We're a mature adult nowadays. We can drink alcohol, and I'm just really excited to still be here and doing this work.
The agency is an adult. That's good. All right. Well, let's dive into communications for nonprofits in particular. This episode is part of our Defend Nonprofits, Defend Democracy series, where we talk about what's happening with the Trump administration's war on the nonprofit sector and philanthropy, and what people are doing in different ways to defend the sector as part of defending our democracy, because the sector is part of our democracy.
Indeed.
And also what we can do to advance the sector and go on offense, if you will, not just be on defense. So you coined this phrase that I was unfamiliar with and really grateful to learn about. The phrase is narrative resilience. So tell us, what do you mean by the term, and why is it important for nonprofit communications?
Thank you for that. So yes, did coin narrative resilience. I was trying to create some language to describe what is required for organizations to combat some of the counter narratives that are coming frequently. And so narrative resilience is the ability to withstand, adapt, and respond to harmful narratives and dynamics while continuing to promote the values, truths, and frames that align with an organization's mission. So when you think about it, like, can we withstand the attack? Can we hold the line, or can we deal with the pressure? Can we adapt to it? Can we make shifts? And how do we respond? And I think one of the things that I'm most concerned about right now is there's a lot of conversations about this idea of silence or neutrality because organizations don't want to be attacked, which makes perfect sense to me. But while we're being silent, it's giving more air to some of the harmful narratives. And so my concern is if we are not resilient in the narratives, that people begin to believe false information, that when people are saying like, oh, climate change is a hoax, or, if they don't have other references and other voices that are constantly sort of sharing facts and sort of impact on different communities, that we will find ourselves needing to be even more diligent later and may not be able to catch up. And so when you look at social media, when you look at the way people consume information, there are like very organized ecosystems that are devised to sort of spread false information. And so when we're not, like when we're being neutral and not sort of naming with specificity what the facts are, or we're not responding because we have these threats, then it just gives more believability or allows for more believability. And so I think that we cannot assume that things are obvious to people. We cannot assume that. Of course, folks know that. One of our core responsibilities is to inform and continue to inform, to protect our democracy, to protect the people and the communities and all of the things that we care about through the lens of social change. And so narrative resilience is really about helping organizations ensure that they have that durability within their narrative to be able to withstand the evolution of the way information sort of is exchanged throughout our country and world.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting as I listen to you, I'm thinking about both the resilience and durability of the organization to continue to put its voice out there, to speak up, to do the communications that's needed. And then there's the durability of the narrative that they are spinning, that they are putting out there. Like, does it stick or does it have enough coherence?
Yep.
So is it both? Is it that organizations need the endurance, or whoever the communicator is, and the narrative or message itself? Or is it really about one or the other?
I think it's both. I think when we're talking about the term, we're primarily framing it through what the organization's narrative or related to the social issue, but the individual who's communicating it, sort of sharing it in their own words, should also be paying attention to the signals, right? We talk about detecting a drift, like what happens when a narrative was introduced and the environment is changing, right? So now does it take on new meaning? And so it's not a one and done. We need to be constantly measuring and paying attention. How are people responding? Are there words and terms that are being introduced into our societal lexicon that are shifting people's connection to what the narrative is? This word means something different now. And so, sort of losing some of its strength. And so I think for both the individual and the organization, the idea of this resiliency and sort of paying attention to the signals and what's happening in the world and emerging news stories are all important to the viability and strength of a narrative.
Yeah, that's really helpful and seems very important because there is such a dynamic with this administration where they are such such geniuses at the news cycle and at literally being resilient. Like, okay, our ICE team shot and murdered in cold blood 2 white American citizens who were peacefully protesting. Okay, let's see. Our base won't like that, especially the dude with the gun, the legally carrying the gun. So what do we do? Right? Like, it's not like, okay, let's apologize and fire some people. It's like, okay, we'll call them terrorists with the people we killed. And they managed to get through it to the next thing, and then it's like gone.
Yep.
And they also do a genius job of like, oh, you're calling our stuff fake news. We'll just call your stuff fake news, and then just keep calling you fake news until everybody's fake news and you're the fake news, not us.
That is correct.
The thing about the meaning of words changing and I don't even know what you call it, reclaiming the words and like reshaping them. And
it's co-opting the language.
Co-opting. Thank you. For giving me the language.
Sure. It's co-opting the language. It's creating a new reality for people, right? And so one of the things and I do not want to spend much time on the opposition, but one of the things that they have done so brilliantly is they understand culture and identity. They understand the need for people to feel a sense of belonging. They understand where the pain points and how to respond to them really quickly in a way that people feel like, I feel seen here. So maybe I don't believe in every pillar of like, quote unquote, this particular group of people's sort of individual constitution, but there are key pieces of like their world order that resonates with me. And so I'm going to join. Maybe I'll be a little bit fringe for a little bit. And then slowly, as I continue to hear this language, as I continue to see myself in this, I then become one, right? And so I think one of the things that we need to be thinking about also as the role and what communications can do beautifully, it does sort of help people to sort of find community, right? It does, like if we are framing stories, people, solutions, challenges properly, it creates a sense of identity. When we talk about affordability, which was like huge in New York and the mayoral race and Mayor Mamdani, he did a great job. His team did a great job in sort of talking about that in a way that people understood, right? And so one of the things that we see is we're talking, but we're not talking to the people. We're not speaking the right language. We are not sort of creating that emotional connection in the language. We're speaking facts, which oftentimes facts are boring. Like they're important and I always want us to stick to the facts, but can we frame the facts and sort of couple it with emotion so that people are connected? Emotion is the way to sort of build that connection. Where are the identity aspects of it? Where is the culture? Like, do you understand like why this holiday or why this space, why this land is important to me? And so like all the signs are there and certain people are doing certain parts of it. How do we put it all together to really advance the agenda where we're bringing social change and sort of remembering the humanity of the people that are on this earth?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, culture and community makes a lot of sense to me, an emotional connection. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what's happening with the funding community, and there are funders out there, philanthropic funders who want to support narrative change and support a positive narrative about the nonprofit community and philanthropy, giving, and the progressive movement and all of those pieces. So I know you have some resources specifically for funders. In particular, you shared this idea of the Narrative Resilience Index. If you could talk about what that is and how funders can use it, that would be great.
Sure. So the Narrative Resilience Index is a tool that we developed to help foundations sort of get a sense of where the narrative exists within their portfolio. So if a funder has 20 organizations that it's funding focused on, I'm going to use my climate example again, even if they are not all focused on the same piece of the climate pie, who's saying what things, which narratives are resonating with audiences? Where's the disconnect? Where's the shared language? What parts of it are believable? Which parts of it need to evolve? And I want to make very clear, this tool is not to be sort of punitive to say, hey, organization X, how come you're not doing that? That is not what this is about. This is about strengthening to say, we may need to offer some additional supports because this part is really strong and maybe we need to shore up this piece of it. Or where are there disconnects which sort of hinder people from fully understanding the narrative, because when they hear this part, but it doesn't sort of relate to this other piece of it, people are just confused. And so what we're wanting to do with the index is to allow foundations to say, okay, for this investment, we see a very strong narrative and here are our opportunities. Here's how we can further invest in these organizations and support them. Or oh, wow, we're really sort of creating groundswell around this space. What's the next step? And so it's not about sort of looking at individual organizations, just looking at the portfolio. So if I was a funder, that would be really enticing to me to not just be able to look at the organizations individually, but see what does this particular pool of organizations that we're supporting, where are their alignment points, or where are their competing narratives, where are their opportunities, right? And so for me as a foundation, always wanted to look for the opportunity, the next step, and understanding that narrative is driving so much of public understanding, is driving how people trust institutions, is driving how people are responding to the work. And so that to me feels like a fairly minimal investment to make sure that we have a strong foundation.
And we're not using this tool. I mean, I think it's brilliant because foundations are one of the important entities in our sector that have that kind of bird's eye view of different fields of work or issue areas or movements, and that have the convening power to bring them together.
Yes.
And it's risky, too, because the organizations don't want the funders determining what their messages should be. So that's not what this tool is doing, right?
Yeah. So no, that should not be the business of the funder. If I were a nonprofit, a grantee partner to a foundation, I would be excited about this because I then have your support in a different way, and the way you're looking at the holistic system versus me as an individual. I would hope that what comes out of that sort of affirms what I've been sharing about our work. And if there are places where we can strengthen it, then you see the opportunity and I don't have to sell you on why this should be funded. The other reason why this is really important is there's now, and Rusty, I know you've heard this, I want to say in the last maybe 15, 20 years, there have been conversations about field building. How do we bring the field around a particular social issue together to scale, to solve a problem? The conversation bubbles up, everybody's talking about it, and then it sort of dies down. It's always there, but it has its peaks and valleys. Field building is popping up again. And so when we talk about field building, we cannot have that conversation without thinking about the communications infrastructure required to do that. So are we using the same language, right? Are we being innovative in our communications approaches? Are we sort of exercising narrative resilience? And so I think for foundations, and the other sort of sales point to this is, this could be a way for us to determine or pilot some of the sort of channels around field building. If I'm an individual nonprofit, the other benefit I see here is while unfortunately, there is competition for financial resources. There is not competition among us all wanting to solve or address an issue, trying to find commonalities and understanding what are the next steps? Can we collectively read the signals? So, what are the counter narratives? What are other people saying? Where are audiences fatigued? Where is there disconnect and confusion? And how can we as a collective strongly approach these challenges? So I think it's a tool for strengthening versus sort of, like I said, any punitive or sort of making people feel organizations feel like they don't have the agency and the sort of expertise to lead the conversation with the foundation once the findings are there.
Great. Okay. And so for narrative resilience and this narrative resilience index, I imagine the Wakeman Agency offers support for individual nonprofits and for foundations to support this kind of activity. I know on the insights portion of your website, there's a post about why we need narrative resilience now and other things that we can put in the show notes as well with links. But are there tools or services or articles that folks should check out?
Yes, there are definitely some items on our insights page, as you mentioned, that talk about in more detail what narrative resilience is. And then we do have a narrative resilience program where organizations can work with us directly. And we sort of go through, create a scorecard. So is your narrative believable? Does it represent your values? Does it speak to some of the current narrative landscape about the issue? Is there emotional resonance? Do people feel connected to it in a way that they want to take actions? And also thinking about the signals, like what are the pressures? Where are you maybe vulnerable? So yes, we do have a program to support organizations. And then as we spoke about, the index is that portfolio view for foundations. So lots of narrative goodies for organizations. And I will say the other thing I like about the narrative resilience program for nonprofits, it is not a large investment nor a long-term investment. And so when we talk about narrative, narrative is not a one and done. It's constantly evolving. You're sort of responding to external factors and pressures. This is giving you a snapshot of where you are today and recommendations for things to consider, things to prepare for, things to worry about. And so you're not working with us for 2 years and we're giving you a report. It's a much shorter, condensed, like, where are we today? What should be keeping me up at night? What should I be celebrating because we're doing a great job of? And really just to give some context to the moment and some short-term planning, and then strategically how to sort of use some foresight to plan for the future.
Great. And how can people find out more or get in touch? Is this like a cohort thing or a time thing, or is it kind of as needed?
It's interesting you say that. So the narrative resilience program can be done with an individual organization, like so one-to-one with Wakeman, or it could be done as a cohort. And so for organizations working on the same issue, we've had conversations with foundations who were thinking like, for our portfolio, we'd like to maybe have 8 organizations working on this issue. Can that be done? So the answer is yes. So it could be individual or group. The other thing that has come up is, can funders sort of fund a cohort of organizations to participate in the narrative resilience program? So participating individually, but being funded by a single funder, that is also an option as well. So for all of our nonprofits listening, if your funder offers capacity building grants, this often falls under that.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's a great resource, and I want to learn more. I was thinking about this as I prepared for today, for this conversation, that the nonprofit sector is too invisible, and our workforce is kind of so ubiquitous that it's invisible. People don't know, like policymakers and media don't talk about us as 10% of the workforce, or any of those things, any of those facts don't like come out in the general public awareness or narrative, even when they're talking about policies or news stories that relate directly to and will impact a lot of nonprofits and nonprofit employees. And we're a little too invisible, which mutes our power, our political capital, I think. And then, unfortunately, we're being attacked by a bully who has the biggest bully pulpit in the world and is further weaponizing parts of the government that either used to have nothing to do with nonprofits or used to support nonprofits, like the IRS and the FBI and the Justice Department. So how should funders and nonprofits be thinking about this challenge? And you mentioned capacity building grants. And what I've seen over the last year and a half is like a lot of talk about get your financial house in order, your fiscal, so you can't be attacked for fraud. Get your bylaws and your legal issues in order so you can't be attacked for operating outside of your bylaws or some technicality. So sort of that hunkering down, harden your shell, goes hand in hand with that silence thing you were talking about earlier. We don't want to get attacked. And if we're attacked, we want to be not vulnerable on compliance with the law and the accountants. But it doesn't take into account the communications factor, either proactive or defensive. So how should funders, nonprofits, and our sector be thinking about communications as it fits into this landscape?
Yeah. So all of those things you said about like your financial order, your legal house, all those things are critically important, and I agree 100%. It's not an either or. It's like everything needs to be in order because there is a hunger and appetite to sort of attack the sector. I think when we talk about communications, I think it was the Chronicle of Philanthropy had an article last year, I believe, that talked about organizations no longer being interested at this time or halting public relations because they don't want to be visible.
I remember that. Right.
I understand as the owner of an agency, I understand. I am sort of behind the scenes working with organizations who are very much dealing with all of these challenges and making these decisions. I am also saying that communications is required at every phase of an organization, whether you're being attacked, whether things are great, whether we're sort of like having our moment. And so we need to think about the different ways that communications can be used. So the first thing is this administration has come into fruition after us having a period where we sort of celebrated, finally said out loud that justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion is important, and we believe in it, and we want to make sure that it's embedded in our work and that everyone sort of has a sense of belonging. When we are no longer talking about that or communicating about our work, we are in some ways damaging some of the trust that was built, right? And so we need to be thinking about how do the organizations and the people that we serve, how do they feel when they no longer see like this celebration of it? And maybe it's not in the same way. Maybe it's not a 5-page manifesto on your website, but are you in active communication? Do people understand we're not taking this risk because we still want to be able to serve the people or the resources in the ways that we have? Are we sort of galvanizing people and communicating about our commitments? It doesn't have to be publicly, externally, in the New York Times, but we worked with some organizations that said, let's do some quiet campaigns, right? We don't need to let people know like we're still actively in this work. Are we communicating? Have we found ways to sort of think about what our messaging is? Have we found ways to align with other organizations who have a similar point of view and perspective to make sure that collectively we have not lost our vision for how we want to talk about our work? Oh, have we found ways to connect to the issues that don't directly put us in harm's way? And so one of the things we talk about is if we are not using the JEDI language or the DEI language, which first of all, that language only came into sort of popular view in the last 2 decades. Before that, folks were just doing the work. So we don't need to call it anything, but how do we connect to the outcomes, right? We want to make sure that everyone in this community is economically stable, economic stability. We want to focus on economic mobility. We want to make sure that everyone has like options for education. We don't have to frame that in a particular sort of demographic that points to DEI. We can just talk about the work, right? These are the outcomes that we want to achieve to make America great again, right? Like there are ways for us to sort of communicate that do not put us in that risk. There are ways that we can sort of strategize about the ways that language can sort of help us to even call people in. So right now there are concentric circles, right? There are the people who are on one side, the other side, and the others who are like, you tell me. Like there's ways that we could be thinking about communications to call others in. And to be transparent, for a long time, I wasn't interested in calling others. I'm like, listen, that's your thing. We got work to do. As I think about the fragmentation and like the path forward, there are benefits to trying to call people in. I don't want to make that our primary mission, but there are ways that we can use language and narrative and sort of like going back to that culture and identity piece that I spoke about, that we can absolutely call people in and sort of strengthen our base. And so I don't want us to think of communications as the way that sort of creates risk and vulnerability. I want to think about it as like our superpower. Nonprofits have the lived and earned experience. They have the proximity to the issues. They know better than anyone else what is happening. What do the people need? This is my audience. I know them. We are working side by side. So you can't tell me anything. When I'm in my garden and my landscaper saying things like, you can't tell me, like, you may help take care of these plants, but I know exactly what date these peonies are going to bloom, right? You can't tell me anything about my garden. And so, like, the same for nonprofits, government, corporate, like, as much as they attempt to influence and sort of shift, nonprofits know best. We need to have main character energy in these stories about the work, the value, and the path forward. And in many ways, we are hearing foundations, like for some foundations saying, hey, we have your back, right? That should make people feel a little less fearful of the potential threats.
Well, amen. That was great. Thank you. And thanks for coming on the show and sharing narrative resilience with us and your own take on what's happening. Vanessa Wakeman of the Wakeman Agency, we appreciate what you're doing and looking forward to learning more going forward. So thank you for being here and taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you for having me, and let's not make it another X years. You can have me back again soon.
I would love to. All right, we got to do that. Yeah, and you can have me back soon.
Yes.
I got new things to say since 2018 or whatever.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right. Thanks, Vanessa.
Thank you, Rusty.